Hi, Perry.
Hi, Emily.
I'm glad to be back. Thank you for holding down the fort without me last
I'm
week.
I'm glad you had such a nice vacation, and
I
I
did.
am really excited about today's topic. This is one where, to be honest, I am hoping to get to my smasher pass like through the course of our discussion. I am not there
You
yet.
haven't committed. You're
I
not a
really I
pre-committed.
it's
Okay.
really difficult. We'll get to that. We're talking about full body scans today, and because I know our listeners are dedicated Trekkies, like I know this
Not
because
true.
I choose to believe it. And I I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and watching the doctors use the tricorder scanner, and you just kind of and all of a sudden everything that's wrong with the person. This is basically why I wanted to become a doctor. I assumed that this is how it would work. I frequently walk around telling people, God damn it, I'm a doctor, not a blank. Like that is one of my go-to
Oh my
catchphrases.
God.
Yeah.
I considered becoming a doctor because I wanted to meet Doogie Howser because I had the biggest crush on Neil Patrick Harris.
I have some bad news for you, Emily.
I know. I know. But it's okay. It's okay. And then I didn't become a doctor, and he's not for me, but I still love him. Anyway, my point is we're going to get to your Smasher Pass, and this is a great topic because it apparently intersects with your love of Star Trek and my love of Bayes Rule, and we're gonna find out about both of those things.
Awesome. Let's go.
Okay. Right. It's Thursday, June 25th, and this is Wellness Actually. This week we're asking, what's the deal with full body scans?
And we are back. What's the deal with full body scans? Emily, I am going to start by playing a representative clip from Instagram to get us going here.
So I just did a full body scan that tests for over 500 different conditions, including cancer. Now you sit in this little tube thing for an hour and you just watch a little Netflix show, and then you'll get all the information system. For each of those categories, there's a huge list, but they did find a nodule in my lung. So let me show you that. You can see here, there's a lung nodule. You can see it there. It's 0.5 centimeters. Now, apparently what the doctor told me is that lung nodule is either from a prior lung infection, which is okay, and that it doesn't look like it's cancerous. But we're going to get a scan in a year from now and just make sure it doesn't grow, and we'll keep an eye on it. And so this scan, it's preventative, and I just don't understand why health insurance companies don't offer and pay for this, and or why our entire system doesn't provide us more preventative care like this.
All right. So there you have someone, and this was not hard to find a clip like this. There are hundreds of them out there of people who have gone through these direct to consumer scans. These are things that you pay for out of pocket, and, find something. And broadly speaking, the people seem quite grateful that they've found a thing.
Yeah. This is a really okay. So let me just tee up why I think this space is so complicated, because
Please.
these scans are on a long continuum, some of which we recommend. And so you will often hear people, doctors say like, well, you don't need a full body scan.
Mhm.
Like you don't need a full body scan. But then in the same breath, it'll be like, but definitely get this mammogram and definitely
Right.
get this colon cancer screening and definitely get. And I think that's where it's hard to navigate. It's, well, you told me these scans I want. Why don't I want this other scan? It just seems like it would be better. And
Isn't more information
is
better?
it more information better? And
Yeah.
there's a sense in which the answer must be yes, and then other senses in which the answer must be no. But before we get into that, there are a lot of these scans. The one I think my guess is people have heard most frequently is a company called Pronovo, which does a full body MRI, sends it to a radiologist and probably some AI to read it. These cost something in the range of $1,000 to $2,500, and they come back with some information about what to do, and then you maybe have to follow up in some other way. So that's the most popular one. There are a bunch of
popularized by no less than Kim Kardashian, who got some significant flack actually for promoting Pronuvo. We can talk about this in a little bit, but Kim Kardashian got one of these scans. By the way, Pronuvo often gifts these scans to celebrities and influencers. So if you look at the Pronuvo,
no one has offered me any.
I still haven't gotten my graphics card from episode 1 or 2 either. Come on.
We're waiting, guys.
Come on, guys. So Pronuvo will gift these scans to influencers, and then, they'll put something on Instagram and with a little discount code, and stuff like that. This is clearly part of their marketing strategy. Kim Kardashian had a Pronuvo scan. They found an aneurysm in her brain that got a lot of attention. She talked about it on her reality show. I'm going to hold off for a second to tell you what the end of that story is. But I just want to say that this is something that you will hear a lot about from really famous people.
Yeah. And I think so there are a bunch of companies that do this. I think one thing I wanted to kind of in some ways differentiate a little bit is there is another kind of whole body scan called a DEXA scan, which people will hear about, which is basically a way to scan how much body fat and muscle you have. These are much cheaper and they are a totally different thing. So I sort of, in the space of influencers, these things will get kind of put on top of each other, but they aren't the same thing. Here, we're really talking about these full body, either CT or MRI scans designed to look for things like tumors or aneurysms or other, abnormalities of your body, as opposed to looking at your body fat percentage.
Right. This is really billed as a broad sweep. And we have companies, in addition to Pronuvo, people may have heard of Ezra or TrueScan or the Simon One scan, or there's even some CT versions. There is one that I want to address just because it's exploding on social media just over the past week. So Emily, what if I were to submerge you in water and shoot ultrasound waves through your body? Does that seem like a good idea?
Yes. Yeah, totally. Sounds amazing. Is it a massage?
This is just so people, this is the new Midjourney scan, which is the tech bros are over the moon for. This is Midjourney is the company that did AI image generation.
Yeah.
That was their thing.
That's what I'm familiar. Mm-hmm.
Now they're a full body scanning company.
They're pivoting.
It's always good to pivot. And they've showed a demo of you get submerged in water and this thing goes and you get a whole scan of your body using ultrasound waves.
And then what? How does that help? What?
Well, it's the similar idea to the full body MRI scans, except they're arguing it'll be cheaper, and we can sort of get to the costs in a minute. And the problems with full body ultrasound as well. I just want to say it at the top because I think people will start hearing about this, and we will touch on it. But frankly, the data is all in that full body MRI scan space. This full body ultrasound is completely new, and there's very little we can say about its diagnostic accuracy or anything because it hasn't been really used on humans yet, but you'll see it in your feeds.
How much do you think that the growth of AI is powering this? I mean, radiology is one of the things that AI is sort of the best at, the best kind of doctoring on. I would have thought this is we're only able to do this because AI is reading a huge share of these scans.
In almost all of these companies, AI is billed as augmenting the read from the radiologist. No one is saying it's only AI. You look skeptical.
No, I think that is the way that radiology, I think, will work for everything, is that the AI does a first read and somebody does a follow-up read. We have actually quite a significant radiologist shortage at the moment. And so this is a natural place for AI to come in, including for these kind of scans.
Yeah. And if you're one of these companies trying to raise money from investors, are you not going to say that AI is part of it? Come on.
AI.
Yeah.
It's everybody's an AI company. It's a meal delivery service. It's more of an AI meal delivery. It's an AI steak. It's, we're optimize AI. It's all about it.
Okay, total aside, but my dystopian prediction for the future of AI and consumerism is that soon enough, Amazon is actually going to start sending things to your house that you haven't ordered. It's going to it's going to show up, and then they'll be like, look, send it back if you don't want it.
That already happens in my house because it's one of my children has ordered it. But it's going to be even worse when Amazon is doing it.
Yeah. All right. Mark my words.
Okay, so before we get into the like what do we know about these things in the data, I actually want to start a little bit bigger picture with how we think about scanning and how we think about results that we get in medicine. So I'm going to give you a quiz. It's a quiz for everybody, so everybody put your thinking cap on. Imagine you have a disease that affects 1 in 10,000 people. And you have a test for the disease that detects 99% of cases with a 2% false positive rate. So it's a really good test. It finds 99% of cases, small false positive rate
Amazing test. Sounds 2%. Great. Mm-hmm.
You give someone the test and they test positive. What is the chance that they have the disease? Short Jeopardy pause.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think?
I think that all your bays belong to us. I know what you're getting at here. But let me tell you what I think your intuition is, and then we can talk about why the intuition is wrong. The intuition is, here's a test that detects 99% of disease. Great. Only has a 2% false positive rate. Great. You got a positive test. Pretty sure you have the disease.
Pretty sure you have
That
it.
sounds right. Yeah. Bad news, right? You have the positive test. But you mentioned that this is a pretty rare disease, 1 in 10,000. And so maybe you can walk us through the math, Emily, of like what the actual value of a positive test is here.
So the answer to the question is 1/2 of 1%. So with a positive test, the chance that you actually have the disease is 1 in 200. And the reason for that is that if you think about this test, let's say you have 10,000 people you test, one of them has it, you're going to find that. A very, very good chance you find that
99% chance you find
99% chance. Let's say we find that one person.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a 2% false positive rate. And that means of the 9,999 people who don't have it, about 200 of them are going to test positive.
Mm.
And so now you've got 200 people who tested positive who don't have it, and one person who tested positive who does. And that means that it's about 1 in 200. That's the chance that you actually are affected. And so
if you're sitting there with a positive test.
If you're sitting there with a positive test.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really, I have given this test to many people, ranging from middle school students to members of an Ivy League corporation, and almost nobody gets it, right? It's about, and in fact, when you give this to doctors, they also mostly don't get it right. I guess you're an exception. And a lot of people have the instinct it's like 90, 95%. The reason that I say this is that one of the most significant issues with this kind of full body scan, and by the way, with any kind of scanning for conditions, is that many of these conditions are pretty rare and false positives are pretty common. So when you go to scan people for something like breast cancer, even with a standard mammogram, there's a lot of false positives, a lot of incidental findings, a lot of just, we saw something on the mammogram, and then when we went more into it, it wasn't in there. And that's important for 2 reasons. One is that if you do more of this scanning, you're just going to have more of these false positives. Now you'll have more true positives also, but you will end up with a lot of people either very anxious or just having a lot of additional testing that they didn't necessarily need. And when we think about these tests, we want to weigh those things. And full body scans are an extreme form of a problem that is already there with any kind of scanning. So we already think about this problem with breast cancer screening or colonoscopy or prostate cancer screening or whatever. That's already an issue. If you're now scanning somebody's entire body and picking up every weird rando thing in their elbow, you're going to have this problem even more extreme. So
this is so important, but it's also going to play into the central tension that I have with these scans. And we'll get there, but broadly speaking, there's always going to be this thing that we can look objectively at the numbers on a population level and be like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of false positives and people are going to be chasing this down and seeing the doctor and stuff. But there is that one guy. There's that one guy you said who actually had that rare disease that we caught. And there's clearly some value in catching that one guy. But the question is sort of how many false positives is worth the true positive. And this is where I get stuck.
And I think that's part of the reason it's a very complicated question is that it's probably different if we think about what the individual incentive is versus the kind of health system incentive. So when we make decisions about, who should we recommend a mammography for, we're making decisions based on trading off false positives and true positives from a kind of like population cost perspective, which may be the right frame for some decisions, but may be different from you as an individual. And what do what is sort of your risk tolerance and what is your demand? And I will tell you from a personal level, when my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer, it was an incidental finding on a CT scan that was being done for some other reason. She had vertigo. They thought she might have a stroke. It turned out they found lung cancer. She was in a risk group because she was a former smoker who could have been going for yearly CT scans. And there's a lot of debate about exactly who should be doing those. And I think all the time, boy, ex post, I really wish that she had been doing that, even if it, from a kind of population standpoint, maybe that isn't the right thing. So for me, that really crystallizes this trade-off between what about the one that you missed?
Yeah, 100%. So there are a couple of concepts that I want people to be aware of. You've hit on one, which is the false positive thing. In medicine, we call these incidentalomas. So
why don't you just give things regular names?
because we like to have jargon so that we can talk
it's an
amongst ourselves.
incidentaloma.
It's an incidentaloma. This was originally named after these things you see on adrenal glands when you get a CAT scan of the abdomen. So we give people CAT scans of the abdomen for, everything, right? You come in with abdominal pain to the ED, whatever. You're getting a CAT scan of your abdomen and pelvis. And then, not infrequently, you see these little spots on an adrenal gland. We typically refer to them as incidentalomas. They were found incidentally. You weren't looking for them, but they tend to necessitate at least some further workup and downstream stuff. And that can happen anywhere in the body. Incidentalomas are things that turn out to be nothing. So you find them and then you've got to do something about it, but then it turns out it didn't matter, right? Like you biopsy that thing on your adrenal gland and it was a benign growth. It would never have hurt you. It's an incidentaloma. There's a related concept, which people have a little more trouble with, called overdiagnosis, which is when you diagnose something that really is bad, like a cancer or something like that. But it turns out that had you not diagnosed it, it probably wouldn't have hurt you at all because you were going to die of something else before this got to you at all. So overdiagnosis is sort of a different thing from an incidentaloma or a false positive. To give you a sense, it's hard to get it like some of this stuff, but there are autopsy studies where we'll look at people who died of something else and ask a question, for example, of okay, you died of not a cancer-related problem. We do an autopsy. How often do we find cancer? And the answer is pretty often. Yeah. 5% of the time. There's a nice study of 800,000 non-cancer autopsies in Japan, where the overall cancer rate was 4.2%. I will say it's a little higher in recent years. Now it's up to 7% overall. And then, of course, the older the person was when they died, the higher the chance of finding an incidental cancer was. This isn't a false positive. Had you found that while they were alive and biopsied it, it would have come back cancer. They would have gotten cancer treatment, but they didn't die of that. So all of that treatment was theoretically overdiagnosis. So that's the second major concept.
Yeah. And I think this is where, for men in particular, a lot of men get prostate cancer before they're dead. And at some point
almost everybody
gets it. And at some point it makes sense to just stop screening for prostate cancer, because if you're 93 years old and we find out you have prostate cancer, it's fine. Something else is going to take you before the prostate cancer for almost everybody. And so that is in this space of overdiagnosis. Again, it's not that it's not cancer. It's just not. We care about the death, not the specific cause of death. And that's...
So this brings me back to Kim Kardashian.
Of course, Kim K.
Okay.
What's Kim K up to?
So what Kim Kardashian told the world, we don't have her report, her Pernuvo report, but what she said publicly is that they found a little or small aneurysm in her brain, as well as some uterine fibroids. She said that, after that Pernuva found the little aneurysm in her brain, she went to Cedars-Sinai. She got, quote, tons of brain scans, met with a bunch of neurosurgeons, et cetera, and decided to do nothing. It was small enough that they decided to do this thing called watchful waiting. That's probably the right choice. Talking about overdiagnosis of aneurysms, if you look at the rate of incidental brain aneurysms at autopsy, okay, so you take people who did not die of a brain aneurysm, but you look at their brain after they died, 2 to 6% have an aneurysm in there. So they are there, and a lot of them don't rupture. And Kim Kardashian's surgeons looked at the size and said, well, this is something we can keep an eye on. Now, she billed this as like a life-saving thing. Like she has talked about this as she is so thankful to know about this. She's reducing the stress in her life to, potentially reduce the risk of this aneurysm bursting. But
I would find this so awful. Like, I feel like, at least for some people, and I would put myself in this camp, the idea that I have this aneurysm, but I'm doing nothing about it, is so much worse than not knowing, because then every time you have a headache, you're like, oh my God, is it my aneurysm? Right? This is a big part of this, is people just being anxious about what might happen, because the information is, because we're not robots and we can't like just pretend the information is not there. And I don't know.
Yeah. And so much of what I see and it's mostly doctors online who are pushing back against full body scans. It's mostly like people, my profession, that's like, guys, careful, false positives, all this kind of thing. And then there's a lot of sort of wellness tech people who are like, no, more information is better. I want to find the thing before it becomes a problem. And hey, I know there's false positive. I know there's overdiagnosis. We'll figure that out over time. We'll learn how better to manage these things. And that's the step where I'm like, this is going to require, if you really want to deal with the false positive issue, a lot of people to have a spot on their liver and to be like, well, there's a 1% chance it's cancer, or maybe let's say there's a 5% chance it's cancer. There's a 95% chance it's not. I'm not going to do anything because chances are it's fine. There's some people who can handle that. There are a lot of people who can't, right? Like the whole reason they did the scan was to find the spot on the liver. Now it needs a biopsy.
Yeah. And I think we see this in outside of the full body scan space in mammography. So our approach to mammograms has gotten better over time. We're doing more mammograms broadly. That's very good. It means we're catching cancers earlier, but there's actually a fairly large, or at least some set of kind of stage 0 cancers for which it may be based on the age of the person or what it looks like. You just shouldn't do anything. And we are almost always doing things. So typically people will be given the choice, we could do watchful waiting or we could do stuff, and people want to do stuff. Once they say you have, ductal blah, blah, blah with the word carcinoma on it, you're doing stuff. And that is maybe a good idea, but it does have trade-offs. I think it's not free for you or for money. I mean, it's not free in terms of money, but it's not free in terms of your emotional state either.
Yeah. I want to walk through the sort of third large concept, which we've tested on here, which is called care cascades.
Wait, can I say before we get to that, can I say sort of something else that happens in here where I think this intersects with some of the way we're doing medicine these days, which is it is much more common for people to do like shared decision making. And shared decision making is great because it puts the patient in the driver's seat at some of the time. And we generally don't want the kind of 1950s doctor where it was like he sits there and smokes a cigarette and tells you, what to do. Like we've moved away, and that's probably for the best, especially with
We're not going to tell your wife she has cancer. It will just disturb her.
It'll just make her sad.
Yeah.
But the idea that the patient should be in the driver's seat around some of these decisions is very stressful for people. And I somehow it comes up more in these cases where we're just not sure what to do. And that piece of it feels like I'm not sure there's a good solution to it, but I think it's yet another piece to adding to this anxiety.
Yeah, it varies obviously based on the patient. Some patients very much want to be told what to do. It's my experience. And they'll phrase that in different ways, but often it comes to me as like, okay, if I were your brother or if I were your father, what would you tell me to do here? Which is always a hard question for me. I'm like, no, I would never tell my own family because I'm completely biased. And then some have very strong opinions. And then, I mean, just to say it, as a doctor, like there are medical legal implications of this stuff, right? Someone comes to me after a full body scan and says, hey, they found this thing on my, on my kidney. It's ambiguous what it is, could be cancer, might not be. What do you think I should do? There's definitely a part of my brain that's like, well, if I don't work this up, if I'm like, well,
it is cancer?
What if it is cancer 5 years from now? And so that's just sort of the way we're structured. It's much safer for me in a cover your ass kind of sense to be like, all right, well, let's get you a dedicated scan of that. Let's get a biopsy of that and so on and so forth. And that is what happens. So a lot of these arguments that's like, oh guys, it's not the scans that are the problem. It's the psychology around them. And we have to get better at dealing with ambiguity is a nice theory, but we're just not very good at it.
No, we're just not. It's a nice theory, but not very realistic.
Yeah. All right. A guy walked into a routine physical feeling completely fine. He walked out 10 units of blood and $50,000 later, and he never actually had anything wrong with him. This is Care Cascades.
Not great.
This is such a great piece of writing from Michael Rothberg, who was writing in JAMA about the true experience of his father and how medicine obligates subsequent testing. So let me tell you what happened to this person and get your opinion. Okay, this older guy comes in, gets his routine physical. His doctor does a physical exam, listens to his heart, pushes on his belly, feels his aorta, an aortic exam. You kind of push down the belly, feel the pulse. The doctor thinks the aorta is a little bit big. Maybe there's an aneurysm there, but there's an appropriate test for that. That's an abdominal ultrasound. So he sends him for an abdominal ultrasound. Turns out the aorta is normal, but during that ultrasound, they see something in the head of the pancreas. That's an incidental finding. All right, well, now there's something in the head of the pancreas. So the next step is, of course, to get a CT scan. Well, good news, the CT scans showed the pancreas was normal, but there was a solitary lesion on his liver. Okay, that needs to be biopsied. So he gets a liver biopsy. It's not liver cancer. That's good news, but it was a hemangioma, which led to a huge bleed requiring a 10 units blood transfusion and an inpatient stay that cost $50,000. Every step of this care was appropriate. There was no malpractice here. This is all exactly what you do. The only exception, actually, is that initial physical exam palpating the aorta. There's no evidence that we're good enough at our physical exam to tell if someone's aorta is dilated or not. But like, if your doctor does that, right, you're sort of like, oh, this is this is their job. They're doing stuff. They're doing stuff. They listen. This is a care cascade, albeit obviously one that's very dramatic. But I love this story because it illustrates how like these aren't bad decisions. Every step of this way was the answer to the board question. Like, what do you do if you see a mass in the head of the pancreas? Well, you get a dedicated CT scan. Like, that is all correct. But it all started from a screening test. In this case, it was a physical exam, not a full body scan.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a very extreme story, but yes. I do think it is, even in the Instagram versions of this, it is what we're seeing from a lot of people who have these scans. You see this, you see this, you see, this, your liver is too big. Like at least one person I know has had these, like they were like, just like your liver is enormous. Like you have an enormous liver, and it led to all this stuff. And it just turned out like this person just had kind of a big liver. Like sometimes you have that. And so we're overdiagnosing, we're care cascading, but again, it's not that the decisions were wrong. And I think that's the question, is where do you stop the decisions? I think that's what's such a hard piece of this, is which of these things do you not want to do? Which piece of information do you want to just stop? And then we're tempted to say, well, you know what, I just shouldn't have gotten the information in the first place, and then we wouldn't have had all these other problems. But then what if you missed the one guy? That's why this is hard.
That's all right. So we've got the big concepts. People, all right, everyone understands now. We have a visceral feeling about what conceptually what the issues are. I think we need to talk about the data.
Yes. What happens when this actually occurs? So let's say 1,000 people get a full body scan. 70 of them, just 70, are going to get totally normal results. 930 will have something abnormal. 300 of them will need some specific follow-up. 22 will have cancer. 5 will have cancer that the scan missed. Anyway, that is a broad summary of the data from these full body scans. How do we feel about that? Doesn't seem amazing.
This crystallizes everything we've been saying to me. All right, first of all, if you're going to get one of these scans, by the way, this data comes from the Polaris study, which is a Pronuvo-funded study. It's still recruiting, but this was their initial read. So, yeah, you get one of these scans, there's a 93% chance they'll find something abnormal. Like if you think you're going to go and get a clean bill of health, you're not.
You're not. No.
But
and I think that's good. That's good for people to know coming into this. You know, like if you go for one of these, like they're finding something, right? This is actually what my doctor told me the first time I had a mammogram. She was like, they always find something. It's probably fine. You know, it's like, so you're going into this, they're going to find something.
Yeah. The next question, of course, is it actionable, right? Like, you know, people have found, for example, modest slip discs or something like that. And for some people that's useful. Like, oh, that's why I have back pain. Okay, great. There's nothing to be done about it, or maybe get some PT. But 30% of people will have a finding that requires specific follow-up. Like you now have to see another doctor or get another scan or get another test or something to tie this together. And that's where we start running into this, there's sort of an ethical issue here, which is that the ethical issue with full body scans is that they privatize profits, but socialize the risks. This is one of the problems I have with these companies, is that like they make money from us, right? Like you pay them. But if they find something, like your insurance company pays for all that subsequent workup and stuff. And the more people that do this, the companies keep that money, right? They keep the profits that they've made. But theoretically, you're the economist, Emily. Theoretically, if we're chasing down all these incidentalomas, it's going to drive up insurance costs for everyone, right? Because the insurance just has to be like, well, we got to allocate X number of dollars per person for the weird stuff that it's going to get fined in full body scans.
Sure. And also, like, there's a much more direct version of this, which is if anybody is over 65, we're already, your tax dollars are paying for their health care. And so if they get this thing, then Medicare is paying, and you're paying for Medicare.
Right. So you're not the 30% of people who get follow-up, like generally they're not paying they're paying their deductibles or whatever. And so people should be aware, especially if you have a high deductible plan, that you might be digging into that. But, that's still sort of a socialized form of medicine. 22 have cancer. And this is a study where they proved it. These are biopsy proven cancers. So 2.2% out of the 1,000 people who got a Pronuvo scan. And this is where I keep just like hitting the wall in terms of what I think about this, because from a public health standpoint, I'm like, well, clearly this is a bad idea. It costs way too much to the public. Question. It's like no agency would ever recommend this. It's clearly not cost effective. You're spending so much money chasing down nonsense. But for an individual one of those 22 people, Emily, like, what if you're one of those 22 people?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, once you put it in that frame, again, our psychology makes it very difficult, because then you're in a loss frame of basically, if you don't do this, what if you're one of the 22 people? And then that's the salient fact that feels terrible. And of course I would do anything to not be, to have this found as part of those 22 people.
Yeah. Now we don't know if those 22, what number of them are overdiagnosis, right? So some in theory, those cancers that really were found might have never amounted to anything. I think people might not appreciate this, is like, we as doctors don't really understand disease before it becomes symptomatic in a lot of cases. Like the way we diagnose most cancers, not the screening ones, not breast cancer and colon cancer, but cancers that come up in other ways, is because someone has symptoms, and yes, sometimes they get found incidentally. We know that it seems that cancers start off small and get bigger over time. We tend to find them when they are not small, unless it's a screening detected cancer. We don't really know if the small ones always become the big ones. Like we don't, because we've never done a study where we do a full body scan and just sit on our hands and watch. Maybe that'll happen in the future. I'm not sure, but you're sort of obligated because of your understanding of cancer biology to like, you got to do something about these 22 cancers. But I can't tell you for sure that they all would have killed these people.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's missing from this, both from this discussion and from the data, is probably two things. So one is just a lot of these being done, right? So if we had a bigger database and we understood more about what are the things that will turn into something and what are the things that are not, then this information would be more valuable because you would have more of a sense of what to action on. Even within those people with the abnormal findings, you would have a better sense of like, like 73% of people have a lesion on their pancreas. Is no big deal. Like we see that all the time.
Yeah.
Since we haven't done this, it's hard to say that.
Right.
I think the second piece here is most of the time people are doing this once, or at least most of the data is on the first time you do a scan. And a lot of what we are looking for in medicine to diagnose whether something's a problem is a change, right? Think about dermatology. Think about skin cancer screening. Why do you go back to the dermatologist every 6 months if you're at high risk for skin cancer? It's because they're looking for, did that change? There's no problem with just being a person full of moles. The problem is when your moles start looking weird and being a different weird color.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is a case where if you had one scan and then you can compare them over time, that second scan is going to be a lot more cost effective than the first scan. Because the second time you do the scan, all of those things that like we saw it before and it looks the same now, we're just ignoring, we're into the things that are changing. And I think that's the kind of promise here. I assume Pronuvo tells you should do this every 23 days or whatever, because that's what money is for. But it does feel like
I think there's something there. I think there's something there. I will say the Midjourney, that whole body ultrasound submerged in water like sci-fi thing, is specifically marketing it for that. They're like, we're going to be cheaper. They're saying it might only be $100 a scan, which like, I've got a bridge to sell you if it turns out to be $100, but that's fine. Maybe VC funds it like Uber, but they're like, oh yeah, then you can do this repeatedly. So we're going to solve the false positive and the incidentaloma stuff by you'll do this again and again, and we'll watch things over time. And the answer is like, okay, maybe, but we have no data to suggest that that's the case yet. So there's those 5 people in the Pronuvo study that ended up having a cancer that Pronuvo missed. I'll point out there's just some things that MRIs don't see very well. So breast, colon, and thyroid are like kind of classic, hard to see on MRI. On a whole body MRI, you can get dedicated breast MRI, for example, but that's not how this works. Breast and colon obviously are ones that we screen for. So, even if you're doing a whole body scan, you still want to do your age recommended cancer screening too.
Yes. You just want to be constantly getting screened. That's
got to generate those medical expenses.
What else do we want to say about this? What else do you want to hit on?
Let's maybe we can talk about the actual data of incidentalomas. So you had alluded to the fact of, you get one of these done and they find something wrong. You might want to know, was that a common thing to find, or am I a real outlier here? So I'm not sure if you saw this study in 2014 looking at whole body MRI and sort of the rate of findings.
So I think it's worth sort of saying how common it is to find some kind of, as you call it, an incidentaloma when we do these, just in case people go to do it. Like what is going to happen is not that they're going to tell you everything's fine. Something is going to happen. So to put some data on this, there's a 2014 study that looked at 666 MRIs performed on people who were old. Some people, whatever. The 666 MRIs performed on people, and they looked at what were the incidental findings. And I think an important point to note is that they found some incidental finding in 659 of the 666 people that they scanned. So that is almost everyone. I don't know what happened to those 7 people. Maybe there was an error in their scan or something. But basically, everyone found something that was wrong. And, some of this is in your brain. Some of it is in your spine. Some of them are renal cysts. There were many different things that they found. But for me, the headline here was like, you always get something.
Yeah.
Was that your headline?
Yeah. I mean, I'll put some numbers on it for you. So like between 22 in the younger age group, 22% had some evidence of brain infarct, 45% in the older group, things, just like little areas of the brain that look like they've had a problem in the past. 5% of the younger cohort had pulmonary nodules, 16% in the older cohort, renal cysts, 17% and 41%, spinal degeneration, 23% and 45%. So these are like, you're going to see this stuff. So be prepared. Like there's a very good chance that someone's going to tell you after a full body scan that you've got a nodule in your lung, you've got a spot in your kidney, you have disc generation, or even that you may have at one point in the past had a micro stroke that you never noticed.
Yeah. So can we talk about whether there are medical risks to doing this? So, I mean, we've talked a tremendous amount about what I think of as sort of cost risks, but also psychology risks. Somebody's gonna tell you you had a mini stroke, like maybe that's gonna freak you out. But we are also, interestingly, many of the same people who are into these things are also very worried about radiation from like their microwave. And so I always find it interesting to be like, people don't want to stand in front of their microwave because of microwaves, but then they want to go into an MRI machine and get, zappered.
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
Not really. The medical risk is mostly from the downstream stuff. So MRIs don't use ionizing radiation in contrast to CT scans. So there theoretically is no increased risk of cancer from repeated MRI scanning. There are companies that offer whole body CT scans, and that certainly is radiation. And so like that in theory would increase your risk of cancer over time. But for whole body MRI, probably not. I guess if you're claustrophobic, there's a risk you could freak out. Those tubes are a little bit tight.
Yeah, we should say the MRI, they put you on a tube and they get you in this like quite loud tube and they go.
Yeah, so it's not super comfortable. But yeah, I don't think it's a cancer issue.
Okay, no cancer. Is it okay to stand in front of the microwave?
How else are you going to do it?
We'll do that later.
I have to watch my food carefully because I'm so hungry.
Okay, does anyone in the official doctor space think these are a good idea?
No.
Yeah, I read too.
The formal like recommendations from the medical societies are like are that no, that screening whole body MRI is not cost effective and will not save lives. It's interesting though.
Yeah. I will say though, 22 people. Like, how do they confront that?
I know
some of those people maybe were saved by this.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a chance.
You're saying there's a chance.
I mean, in the end, I think the problem is that we don't have the real high quality study that you would do here, which is a full-on randomized trial where you take 10,000 people and you do a whole body MRI and you do take 10,000 people that don't, you follow them for 10 years and you see what happens. The thing about those 22 people with cancer, we already, like some of them, maybe the cancer never matters, never would have been detected. They die of something else. Some of them, the cancer would be detected anyway. They develop a symptom. And although it's often true that detecting a cancer earlier is better than detecting it later, that's not always the case. And, something comes up in some other way and you pick up that cancer and you get it treated and there's no difference in outcomes. And so there's a lot of ways that even in those 22 people, like if you would do the sliding doors thing of, their life where they went through the whole body MRI and their life where they didn't go through the whole body MRI, the outcomes end up being the same, at least on sort of the broad population level.
Yeah.
There's one.
I like that study. That study's probably too expensive.
It's an expensive study. There's one study I really kind of like that I thought was clever in this space. This is from the European Journal of Epidemiology, and they actually they did a whole body MRI on about 3,300 people. So everyone got it, but they actually only disclosed the findings to half of them. That's what they sort of randomized, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, I think this is sort of something that maybe you could only do in Europe. And what they found is that if you disclosed to people the rate of biopsy of something that turns out not to be cancer was 39% higher. Okay, so basically you see something, they get biopsied, it's not cancer. So you've got about a 40% increased risk of getting a needle stuck in you and it turns out to be nothing. But the rate of biopsies that did turn out to be cancer was 74% higher. Now, there weren't numerically, there were very few of these, but sure enough, some of those spots do turn out to be cancer, as we've seen before. The authors concluded that there was good evidence of over-testing and over-diagnosis, and called for further research. But I think this is a potential study design that, like, if people were willing to not hear their results for 2 years, but then you can even imagine, like, 2 years later when the study's over, they're like, oh, by the way, here are your results. Like, there's a big spot on your liver. Like,
check it, get it checked out.
Don't be mad. I mean, you have to do a really good job of informed consent.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's all kinds of interesting sort of information procedures you could think about here, which is, can you have your AI after it reads the radiology report? Can you have it like decide how to, like, which pieces of information are potentially actionable and which are not? Again, something for which having more data would be.
I've got one other hypothetical for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Emily, as we're coming down to smash or pass this. So I was thinking that, one of the issues on a population level is the costs borne by downstream care, which, as we said, are sort of borne by all of us, and the profits are absorbed by these few companies. Okay. Imagine a world where the insurance companies start to say, like, look, listen, we're not going to pay for anything that happens downstream of these scans, which I don't know if that's possible. Or I'll give you an alternative view. Well, they're like, okay, you can, anything that you chase down after these scans, if it turns out to be like a cancer or something that would have killed you, we'll pay for all that care. But if it turns out to be an incidentaloma and you get a biopsy and it's benign, we're not paying for any of that. Do you think that changes the individual calculus here? If more of the risk of the results is borne by the individual instead of like the insurance company or society, does that change the outlook for these companies?
I think it would change the outlook for the companies quite a lot in the long term, because I think it would limit their growth. I mean, right now, this is broadly consumed by a set of people with quite a lot of resources, for whom I suspect that incentive would be pretty small on the margin.
They're like, okay, I'll pay for it. That's fine.
Yeah, Kim Kardashian can pay for her extra stuff.
Right.
But if you think about trying to expand this into like everybody has this, then yes, absolutely. It's going to, the like downstream costs of this are going to matter. On the other hand, again, getting back to the psychology, if you put it in a loss frame, like we're going to find, what if you're one of the 22 people, like, so maybe it'll cost you a little bit of money, but you might find out that you have cancer and then not die from it so soon. That's a very, very, very powerful pull.
All right, Emily, I need you to go first here. You got to tell me, please convince me, smash or pass. This is really hard.
I also find this one very hard, but right now I am a pass. I think that the incidental findings feel so much more central to me than the other findings. And I think if people are doing a good job of the regular cancer screenings that they are supposed to be doing, mammography, colon cancer screening, etc., that is sufficient. So I'm a pass.
Yeah, those screenings had randomized trial data to show that they decrease breast cancer specific or colon cancer specific mortality. Like, they did that work. These companies have not done that work yet. So by that standard, I'm going to say I'm definitely a pass on the sort of population wide level, but for an individual, let me just personally, like, no, I'm a pass. Like, I don't want to do this. I think it'll find something that I have to deal with. I don't want to deal with more shit. I'm going to pass.
Okay. We're passing. You seem sad, but
I
will say this is the hardest.
But what if I have cancer?
Of these that we have done for me in terms of like the smash or pass decision.
Yeah.
It's something I do think about, like, and I do all kinds of other weird, like all these like blood tests and all this kind of stuff. But this one is just like one step too far.
Yeah. We're not going to blame anyone for doing it. How about that?
No, that's for sure. We don't blame people. All right. That's it for full body scans.